Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Saturday, July 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Ball State game in 63 days, the game against Michigan in 147 days. Our friends at Jeff Ruby's Columbus are proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. On today's show, you're going to get to hear a little bit more from Ohio State Athletic Director Ross Bjork. Our conversation with him a little bit over a week ago at this point. He had a ton of interesting things to say. Today's show, we're just going to be focusing on sort of the future of college football a little bit, the Super League, the potential of a Big Ten SEC breakaway, the TV deals with the different leagues going to get pooled. How would that impact Ohio State? Conference expansion, is that something that could get outlawed by Congress? Is that something that the Big Ten and SEC could try and jump the gun on? A lot of really interesting answers on a lot of that kind of stuff. So let's do the negotiating the TV deals all together. That is something where, pooling your media rights is the way it's been brought up in conversation over the last few months. And the Big 12, the ACC, they are very much in favor of it. The SEC, the Big 10, well, maybe not so much. So what are Ross Bjork's thoughts and Ohio State's thoughts on the idea of all the conferences pooling their media rights and just going to the networks and having one negotiation as opposed to the different leagues doing it at different times?
I think what does that mean? What's the purpose, of that, right? And we have current contracts. Fox owns our TV rights till 2036. And so I believe based on an amendment last week, there was language inserted that current contracts cannot be disrupted. So even if, let's just say that would pass, how long is it going to take to have that even happen? And then if it's voluntary, truly voluntary, are we going to be forced into it through a lawsuit or something like that? All of that has to be structured in a way where, again, we have the most amount of flexibility to operate like we see fit, which is what we have now.
So if that does go through, and again, there's a long way before that would kick in, but would Ohio State potentially lose money in a scenario where those media rights would be pooled?
There's a lot of, I would call it speculation on what value really is in the marketplace. I don't think anybody's been able to do a true analysis to say this is what the TV packages are really worth, right? And if you talk to the TV executives, they will tell you there's not a lot of new money in the system. Right, and so I think there's a lot of speculation out there about value and what it means. Look, I know the viewership around Ohio State. I know our brand value. I know the data that I just gave you. Right, I know what our value is worth. So to say, would we lose money? Would we make more? I have no idea how that would work. I do know that we do have a TV window that opens up around the CBS and NBC window that expires in 2030. Again, it's part of Fox. So actually, we'll have some really good data to say what is the market going to yield when those contracts come up for renegotiation or go out to market. We'll have some data around that. And I do believe there's an upside, but I also know that the Big Ten is driving all that value, and if you bring others along with you, does it water it down? We don't know the answer to that because no one has really tested that. And this theory around pooling media rights has caught on, but nobody really has a true roadmap of, one, how it would work, who would organize it, and then what's the value. Those details have not been fleshed out.
One of the things that the bill going through Congress right now is seemingly trying to avoid is a super league. And the Big Ten and the SEC have both said they don't really want that, but, if legislation that goes through that isn't what they want, does Ohio State sort of go along with the legislation, or does that maybe push some of those big teams into sort of walking away from the rest of college football and forming a super league?
I think it depends on what does that mean. What does go along with what, right? Is there other things, again, that we could live with? And let's just say we're talking about a federal bill, I'm assuming. Let's just say there are things in there that, okay, if we get this, we're okay with this. Those things have to be presented at some point in time, and that's kind of the next steps, in the process. A super league can go both ways, right? If they could restrict us from expanding, but what if other leagues would fall apart for some reason, or what if some program emerges and they're ready to take a leap and move up, which has happened in the last, 5 to 8 years, right? Well, those programs are now restricted from moving up. So this whole, again, the construct of the language right now can go both ways. So I do think that's one of the things that I think we'll see changed in the language. What does a Super League mean? Is there a definition of it? I haven't seen one. Is that 18 teams? Is that, I think Commissioner Sankey said that they're a Super League already. And they don't want the SEC network to have Ohio State on it, right? That's their network. So that term got thrown out there when people were talking about all FBS teams, all of the Power Autonomy 4 conferences. But I haven't seen a definition of this is what a Super League means and here's how it functions. Nobody's presented that. And I've seen every proposal from every private equity firm, every third party, every consultant. I've seen it all, but nobody can really describe what it is.
He kind of got asked to clarify, just sort of got asked sort of the same question again, just to sort of get him on the record. Could Ohio State get backed into a corner where legislation that they don't like forces them into making some kind of a change with their alignment?
Potentially. Again, I think that's where this is so fluid right now, and everything is part of the conversation, right? And that's where we have to be really aligned with our Big Ten colleagues. We have to be aligned with our institutional leadership. We will always have to do what's best for Ohio State. That's the mandate. That's our job every single day. We wake up every day thinking about that. What is best for Ohio State? But then how does that layer into partnership? How does that layer into the national? Look, we need the Big Ten to be healthy, right? We do. We need the Big Ten to be healthy, knowing that we're really at the forefront of that. But we need a viable conference that we can rely on. But if we're forced to do something else, and you got to make decisions, then you have to make those decisions, whatever that might be.
Some of the proposals out there in front of Congress and some of the elements of that bill would suggest that leagues would not be allowed to add teams, or at least big leagues would not be allowed to add teams if that bill in Congress passes. There's ways that they can sort of make it so you can't add members if you're over a certain size. So if you're worried about that and you're the Big Ten and you want to bring in teams, could the league just potentially get ahead of that and just, if the bill's not going to pass or go into effect until later this fall or even next winter, could the Big Ten just get ahead of that by adding those teams now?
I saw some articles floating around last night that there's some outreach that people are doing. Other programs are saying, should we try to get ahead of this bill? I don't look, if there's ever expansion, it has to be meaningful. There's got to be a purpose. It's got to drive either a scheduling piece to it, and then it has to drive revenue. I think one of the things that will be a challenge coming up in the next, I'd say, 1 to 5 years is the West Coast teams in the Big Ten continuing to travel east, and then our teams continuing to travel west. Is that viable and sustainable? Should we be more regional based in our scheduling? It doesn't mean we can still have the Big Ten, but maybe you have more regional scheduling within the Big Ten. So to me, it has to be real strategic from that standpoint.
You're trying to make these decisions about the future of college football, and you're doing it with media rights deals that aren't going to be up for another 10 years. The Fox deal not going to be up for 10 years. The CBS and NBC deals with the Big Ten, those are up in 2030, so 4 more years. But how accurately can you even project what these numbers are that you're going to be making these decisions based on when you're looking at 2036? How can you project those numbers accurately to be able to make any kind of decisions on that stuff?
I mean, right now we have the biggest package, right, in college sports. I think there's some really good data on what maybe the early window, that 2030 window, can look like. That process has not started. Fox is our partner in that, so they'll be at the forefront of leading those conversations. Look, the media changes every year. There's new technology, right? And what we haven't really seen in a broad way is the Amazon Prime, the Netflix, the Apple. They've done it in bits and chunks, but have they bought an entire league yet? right? So those are the kind of things that in the next 10 years, who knows what it'll look like? Who knows how we're going to consume the content piece? There may be a chip in our ear that has a screen in front of us, and we're walking around and we're watching the World Cup while we're walking down the street, like in a virtual, like we have no idea. Or we're flying in a, hella taxi, watching the world, like we have no idea what technology is going to do. So, but I think the point of that is it gives us opportunity, to expand. It's so early and so far away that things are going to change and evolve.
When you look at the future of college athletics, there is definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. You've got Ohio State, you got Texas, you've got Georgia, you got these big powerhouse national schools that are bringing in a ton of money, that can sink a ton of money into different sports, no problem. They can spend a bunch of money on football, they can spend a bunch of money on basketball, they can do whatever, they've got the money to do it. Then you got other schools that are theoretically in power conferences like Rutgers or Louisville. They're losing money hand over fist. I mean, Rutgers has maybe lost $500 million, billion with a B, over the last 10 years or so. So in a world where you can't just limit what players are earning, you can't put a salary cap in place right now. So those schools, it would seem like they can't really compete. So are we going to get to a point where only the elite to 8, 10, 15 schools can really spend as much as they need to on football, basketball, everything else, and everyone else? Are they just going to get left behind? Is there a solution for those other schools? Is there a solution that can make Ohio State and Rutgers happy?
I think I don't know if I can predict that, right? Because no one has that sort of crystal ball. I think this is the challenge in the entire enterprise, and I'll just take FBS, right? And I was at Western Kentucky for 2 years, and it was very, very important that we called ourselves a BCS program, right? Because the Sun Belt, we were in the Sun Belt at that time, had access to go to the BCS, even though we knew deep down with a $21 million budget that was going to be really hard. And it was the first year of FBS football for Western Kentucky, my first year as the athletic director. But it was very, very important that we said, we're a BCS program. So the problem with our entire enterprise is it's all about attachment. It's about brand association. It's about being sort of, in the club, if you will. We've got to be in the A4. We've got to be in the FBS. We've got to be a CFP team. We've got to be a BCS team, right? What's hard in our industry is here's our resources and here's where we should aspire to. That's the crux of the whole thing of what you just talked about is our resource allocation is this, but we want to belong to this, and can we match that? And that's leading to institutions. So then it comes down to, is the institution prepared to say that athletics is a strategic enterprise of the institution? Therefore, we will make a strategic investment in that enterprise. Just like they do, there's academic units that do not, quote unquote, make money. But the institution makes a strategic investment. So you're actually starting to see Virginia Tech is allocating dollars from the institution. I think Arkansas announced an allocation. Our friends up north received an allocation from the institution, for their budget. You're starting, Rutgers, you mentioned them, but that's really to kind of philosophically break down your question, Steve. That's the challenge. Is here's our economics, here's what we aspire to. When those things don't match, somebody's got to fill that gap. So I don't know what the answer. The two things I know will kind of get us to a place is how do we develop cost certainty. I don't want to say cost containment. Cost certainty. And if the numbers go up every year, at least you know what they are. But when you don't know where the market's going to go, you don't have certainty. Cost certainty and drive more revenue. That's the chase. Certainty and drive revenue. That's what we all have to move forward on.
All right, that will do it for today's show. If you're listening on your podcast platform of choice, leave us a 5-star rating and review. If you're watching on YouTube, Make sure you are subscribed to our channel. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified when we start doing live shows, which that is coming sooner rather than later. We are in July now, and Big Ten Media Days less than a month away. The start of fall camp just over a month away. The start of the football season just under 2 months away. And oh man, football season, it is getting here. Going to be a busy, busy summer, busy fall, very exciting fall for us at BuckeyeInsiders.com. And of course, on your podcast platform of choice, youtube.com/@BuckeyeInsiders. All those places, you can find us there. You can find us on your social media platform of choice at Buckeye Insiders as well. And thanks again to our friends at Jeff Ruby's Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.